It is so easy to get stuck in research mode if you're a perfectionist, an ambitious person, or somebody with really big dreams. Because when you're in research mode, it's really safe and it's exciting because it makes you feel like you're progressing towards your goals. When in reality, you are exactly where you were 2, 3 months ago when you just started researching. You're just more informed and you have a to do list. And then you get to a point where you're just like, okay, enough's enough. I really got to lock in now. And then you actually start and you are instantly humbled because what you've just made doesn't live up to the expectation that you have in your head. And so you do more research so that you feel like you're making progress towards your goals, but it's really just a way of keeping you safe from being humbled again by your lack of skills. Or what happens is you quit altogether because the experience of being a beginner is just too much, and so you start researching something else and you get stuck into that, and the cycle continues. And I'm saying all this from experience because this is like my fourth attempt at doing YouTube. And I have done all of those things with the over planning and over researching and getting stuck and not actually making progress. And the thing with YouTube is that being a beginner is very public and it's very difficult to actually start because it's so public. And it's what's actually stopped me from starting or even continuing so many times. But the difference between then and all of my attempts versus now is that I took messy action. I dived in without a plan, without any expectations, and honestly, with zero cares. And I just focused on actually doing the work. And I've made so much more progress and development in my skills than I ever did with over planning and over researching. It's like anything that you want to get good at. You can research it to death, but until you actually play the game, you're not actually using your hands and you're not actually experiencing it. So essentially, I wanted to share in this video what I have learned over the last 5-ish months of being a beginner on YouTube. So the lessons that I want to share are less so from the technical side and more so from the emotional, mental, and lifestyle side of being a beginner on YouTube. And if you're new here, my name is Samantha, and I've been on a journey to see just how much I can actually change my life in 6 months. So follow along if you'd like to see more. So the first tip that I wanted to share is basically what I was sharing in the introduction, and that is to just take messy action because you're breaking through the resistance before it even has a chance to form and diving straight into the deep end before you start wigging yourself out with like, oh, how's the temperature? Just like wanting to know everything about the water before actually diving in. And you're going to make so much more progress by actually trying to work those skills and muscles because it's like any new skill or sport or instrument that you want to get your hands on and get better at it. You can do all of the research that you want to do, but at the end of the day, your fingers aren't going to have that muscle memory because it hasn't had a chance to develop and actually be worked. And when it comes to YouTube, it is quite public and it is quite daunting, and you want to protect yourself by doing as much research as possible. And it's not to say don't do any research and just dive straight in. Do your initial research, but set a time limit on it. So give yourself like a week or two to research the kind of content that you want to make and what equipment that you want to get, and then actually just start getting into it before you start wigging yourself out with all of these ideas and how your content needs to look and just starting that cycle of over planning and over researching. Tip number 2 is embracing a tutorial/beginner phase and releasing perfectionism. So when it comes to setting yourself a beginner/tutorial phase, it's really just giving yourself permission to make mistakes and to not be good and to not put all of this pressure on your very first attempts of YouTube to all be masterpieces. So by embracing a beginner phase and a tutorial phase, you're giving yourself that permission to play and experiment because what you initially start off with is this is the kind of content that I want to make and is what I'm going to be known for. It might not actually end up being the kind of content that you like to make. And so when you allow yourself to have that period of practice and experimentation, you start to figure out the kind of content that you actually like to make and have fun making. And it also allows you to release that perfectionism headset. It's just like, oh, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just like trying out different styles and seeing what I like. So tip number 3 is to give yourself grace while you're trying to find your new routine. because you're probably going to find that you're getting distracted really easily. It's hard to, sit down and actually focus and do the work. And especially if you're already working like a 40-hour week, you're in university or you're in high school, you already have like a set routine. And now you've got to find more time to carve out to dedicate to YouTube. And it can be really hard when you're comparing yourself to other people's like lifestyle. They just seem to like have it down. But, for a lot of people, most people just can't switch from one routine and have it all figured out with their brand new routine. It takes time and error to figure out when you're at your most productive and how to pivot when you get distracted and you need to refocus, or if you find that something is just not working and it takes time to get into new habits and new routines, and you also need to figure out what's worth the sacrifice, like what events am I saying yes to, what do I need to like say no to, and what is conducive to my productivity and what's actually holding me back. And that's all going to take weeks, if not months, or like a long time to figure out what your best workflow is. So, tip number 4 is letting go of comparison, unrealistic expectations, and the self imposed timeline. And I found that comparing myself to other people, holding myself to an unrealistic expectation of where I'm going to be by 6 months and the end of the year was really just making me miserable. And it's so annoying to be reminded of everybody is on their own journey, but it's true, which is why it's so annoying to hear. But when you set yourself up for an unrealistic timeline of when you want to accomplish it based on what somebody else was able to accomplish, you're really just setting yourself up for disappointment and anxiety and frustration. And it can be really, really hard when you see that other people have, the aesthetic house, or they have the right background or the right equipment, or they have like some prior experience in some other kind of skills that is easily applied to this new skill that makes them just like automatically, much further along. And it can be really disheartening as a beginner because you just want to be good at it now. And which is why it's so frustrating just how slow growth can be, and to just give yourself some grace and let go of that comparison. And it's a lot easier said than done. I'm not saying this is like an overnight switch. For me, this took probably like 4 weeks to like let go of the timeline and self-imposed expectations, and I became a lot more at peace in my day-to-day life after doing so. So setting goals isn't a bad thing, but when you put a deadline of when you want to accomplish a certain goal, especially when you are a beginner and you haven't developed those skills yet, you haven't developed that routine, when you're trying to meet a deadline, when you haven't given yourself that time to get better at it, it's probably going to take you a lot longer, and you're probably just going to have to keep adjusting the timeline, and it's going to really probably be upsetting that you're not reaching those milestones as fast as you hope for. So lesson number 5 is expecting that you're probably going to have to pivot quite a lot. So when I initially started, I was trying to upload 4 times a week, and they were kind of like a daily video vlog. And that was unrealistic for me to keep up with. I fell behind very quickly. And then I tried to move on to weekly videos, and that was also still taking way too long, and I wasn't able to keep up with it. And then I moved to bi-weekly vlogs, and they were a lot more sustainable. But what I was finding is that I'm still taking too much vlog content. They're still taking way, way, way too long to edit, and I'm not actually enjoying it as much. I like the end product at the end, but the process is taking too long and it's not as enjoyable. And I'm probably not going to be able to keep it up in the long run. And so you need to be able to set a realistic goal for yourself. And what are you able to be the most consistent with? So something that I really enjoy doing is just doing talking head videos where there's minimal editing. There's like lots of planning involved and, thought behind them at the very start. And, the planning and the outline is something that I have fun with. The talking is something that I have fun with. And the minimal editing is something that I prefer. And so by figuring out what's working and what's not, and just pivoting and figuring out slowly, like, what kind of content I like to make, what I'm enjoying, what I don't really enjoy as much. It helped me find my footing on YouTube a lot more about the kind of content that I will start to make more of and the kind of content creator that I want to be. So by finding the workflow that I enjoy the most, it's going to allow me to be consistent with the upload schedule that I can realistically maintain. And it's going to allow me to continue making these videos in the long run. So how much can you actually realistically post, whether that be every week or every 2 weeks, and slowly figuring out the kind of content that you actually like to make so that you can start being consistent for the long run. Because you don't want to be making all of this content that you don't really enjoy and you're kind of feeling like you have to be stuck with it. So just embracing trial and error and figuring out what you do and you don't like. So number 6 is over planning can kill progress. So around the week 7 and 8 mark, I started to want to take YouTube more seriously and I wanted to start putting more effort into it and I wanted to start actually seeing results. So what I ended up doing is start planning like all of the content and writing all of these outlines for videos that I want to make in the next 2 months. And I had like this little schedule of when I'm going to be posting everything. And because every day I was still outlining future content and like planning the stuff that I want to make, my timeline had to keep getting shifted further and further out because I started falling behind with my editing and the current videos that I had already filmed and that were just like sitting in my hard drive that I hadn't edited yet. And so that was actually starting to make me really, really anxious. And I didn't end up using the scripts that I had planned for months and months ahead, and they're now just sitting in my archive. And so I ended up halting my growth when I didn't really have to if I had just only planned for like the next 3 weeks instead of like the next like 2 months. So number 7 is daydreaming, living in the future and putting too much pressure on the outcome. Because I was planning a lot of my content for like the next 2 months around this period, I found that I was daydreaming a lot in my day job and I was getting really, really excited because I thought that if I started taking this really seriously, then I would start to see quick-ish results. And I was also comparing myself to other people's timeline of when they started seeing results as well. And so because I was daydreaming so much and I was living in the future so much, I found that when I actually had to come back to the present and put the actual work in now, I found that I was actually feeling a little bit discontent with the life that I already had. And I was putting so much pressure on all of these videos to do well and to be masterpieces, but I'm still a beginner. And I was putting so much pressure on the outcome. I had a timeline that I wanted to hit, and I put a lot of pressure on each one of my videos to be good so that I can actually hit that timeline. And it made me so anxious and so overwhelmed. And the most humbling part of all of it is I actually blew up this vision in my head so much about what my future life is going to look like that I started getting overwhelmed by it. It's just like, wait a minute, I'm not ready for all of these views and success and all of these brand deals and stuff. Like, I started getting overwhelmed by the success that I hadn't actually had yet. And then I was procrastinating even more on the videos and just freaking myself out so much in my day-to-day life. It's a little bit embarrassing, but that's on me for having a couple of Pisces placements in my big 6 and just being so delulu and a bit of a daydreamer. So I'm not saying that don't daydream and don't think about like the direction of your channel and where you would ideally like to end up in like a year's time. It's more so when you daydream as hard as I did, it made me really discontent in my day-to-day life. It made me really anxious. And daydreaming can be really motivating and it can be really exciting, but it got to the point for me where it became quite detrimental in my day-to-day life. Number 8 is ambition without execution is anxiety. So as an anxious person, anxiety was something that I really, really struggled with overcoming for the last like 4 or 5 months that I've been posting on YouTube. And the biggest thing that I have found that heals my anxiety is actually doing the work. And I'm sure like if you're in high school and you're in university and you've been putting off an assignment and it just starts to build and build and build, and you start procrastinating more and it's just making you feel more anxious. And so I found that actually doing the work actually alleviated my anxiety. And at least with like YouTube, you don't have to like worry about like grades and stuff and like failing in that way. But it will probably alleviate some anxiety that you have if you are also an anxious person, if you are actually able to follow through on a consistent and realistic timeline that you set for yourself. When I set myself a realistic uploading schedule and I'm actually sticking to it, it really does help alleviate that anxiety that I was feeling in my day-to-day life. There are actually multiple things that helped with my anxiety, but I feel like that's one of the biggest ones that really helped. So number 9 is following your curiosity and making the process as enjoyable as you can. So initially, I really enjoyed actually filming the vlog content, but I wasn't necessarily always enjoying the editing process. And I really just foresaw that if I keep this up, I'm probably going to grow to start getting frustrated by it. It's too much. It's something that I would just prefer to do as an every now and again thing. And something else that I've been really enjoying doing is just doing some more research for my talking head style videos and just doing like simple outlines with simple editing and that kind of stuff. Because if you set yourself up and your channel up as something that you're not really enjoying, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to be consistent in the long run. And you might just find that, you know what, I want to dip. This isn't for me anymore. I'm not enjoying it. Or like you've already established yourself as like, you know, this kind of channel and you want to pivot, and then you might end up like losing some of those followers that you've gained. And also the thing with YouTube, a lot of people want to make this a career, but I feel like with YouTube, because it's becoming self-employed and you can really just talk about whatever you want to on YouTube, like why wouldn't you want to make the process enjoyable and talk about the things that you really enjoy? And the last lesson is the journey is going to feel like it is taking forever. Like especially if you want to do this full time or you want to, you know, change your life, it can be really frustrating because you're showing up every single day. You're constantly trying to think about how I can improve. And, you know, a week and 2 weeks feels like, you know, this is forever because, you know, every single day you are sinking time and energy and effort into it. But in reality, you've only actually been working on it for 8 weeks, and that's been 2 months. And for a lot of YouTubers, it actually takes maybe like 6 months, a year and a half, or even longer to start seeing the results. And I've heard so many other YouTubers say and show like their timeline of their growth kind of just looked like this, and it just kind of just skyrocketed. It took forever to get their first 500 subscribers, their first 1,000 subscribers, and then they started like seeing those results eventually. But I've been working on my YouTube channel for about 5 months now, and it feels like I've been working on it for ages. It feels like ages, and I haven't really seen any growth from it yet. And in some way, it does feel a little bit disheartening, but that is just the YouTube process. You are often uploading your first 50 videos and getting absolutely 0 views. And that's something that I just like have to accept and expect of, you know, growing on YouTube. It's just part of like the process that it is probably going to take a really, really long time for a lot of people. And to not let that be a disheartening thing as well. I mean, it does feel a little bit disheartening when you put a lot of effort into a video and it doesn't really blow up. But in my head, it's just like one of these days, eventually they will, like one of them will pop off and I will get like my first 500 subscribers. And also the other thing is that I do enjoy doing this. So it doesn't feel like a total loss because this feels like a really big, like a project for me. This is like something that I do for fun as well. So if it does take like a year or two or even like a bit longer, I am enjoying the process, and it is making me a better person for it. It is improving my skills and it is challenging me in a lot of ways. So essentially that was everything that I wanted to say of everything that I've learned over the last like 4 months of like failing on purpose. And I hope that for other beginner YouTubers, it makes them feel a little bit less alone and it makes them feel like oh, this is like what I can expect. Like there's a lot of videos on like the technical side of like the YouTube algorithm, but maybe this would be like a nice thing for like me sharing like my experience of like the emotional side of like how it feels to be a beginner and like posting on YouTube. And you can also like actually like see my progress because I have like my daily uploads like still up, and I have like my weekly videos still up, and you can literally see like the progress. And everything that I've talked about in this video is pretty much like what you can see in my older content. So if that is something that you wanted to see, it's just like the actual what was actually going on in my head as it was happening. It is still up at the moment. I know maybe that'll change, but I hope that it makes you feel less alone trying to start a YouTube channel, because it is like a big thing. It is very challenging, and I think you should be proud that you have the courage to try. So, yes, that is essentially everything that I wanted to talk about. Thank you if you stuck all the way to the end. I very much appreciate you, and I will talk to you guys all for my next video. Bye bye.